This is an Irreverent podcast. Check out irreverent.fm for shows from all our friends. Hello and welcome to Evangelical. I'm your host, Blake Chastain. This is a lo-fi episode this week. This is actually the second part of my interview with Delisa Perry that I released a few weeks ago. Delisa and I spoke a little while ago, and unfortunately we ran into a number of technical issues, and I really just felt like her story hadn't been fully told. So thankfully, she was able and willing to come back on the show and talk to me a little bit more about her experiences and in college and in grad school and elsewhere. And I'm really happy to be able to share this a little bit left with you. It's a little bit shorter than some of the other episodes that I usually post, but it is essentially this continuation of the story that we began in part one of Delisa's story. So I hope you enjoy it. Standard plugs here at the top. You can follow me on Twitter at brchastain. You can follow the show on Twitter at Evangelicalpod. You can also join the Facebook group by searching for Evangelical on Facebook. You'll just have to answer a few quick questions, and then we'll be able to get you into the community there. Otherwise, you can also support the show 3 different ways. You can tell others about the show if you know of anyone that might be able to relate to the sorts of things we talk about on Evangelical. Please do so. Please also, in that same vein, rate and review the show if you enjoy it over on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. That really helps people discover the show, and it's just a really positive and easy way to help more people find the show. And finally, you can support the show via Patreon over at patreon.com/evangelicalpod. All right, let's get into it. Hi everybody, welcome back to Evangelical. I have with me again, very graciously, Delisa Perry has come back to talk a little bit more about her story. And when I was editing the show then, it really seemed like I had really just started to really get to her story. And then also we did have some technical problems, so I felt like I really wanted to have you back, Delisa, and talk to you some more. So thanks for coming back on the show.
No problem. Thanks for having me again.
Of course. When things were where the last episode really left off was we were talking a bit about your experience with this very hostile couple that you had been placed with, and then your sorts of experiences and how you were trying to process that. So I thought we could go ahead and start there and then move forward in your story a little bit from there as well.
Yeah, so that was around my birthday, October of 2013. And I came back home and I really missed school, which I'm kind of feeling that right now too. But I really missed just being in the classroom and studying philosophy. But again, I had just been told a bunch of lies concerning philosophy and being a Christian, and I shouldn't, be studying philosophy because I'm a Christian, blah, blah, blah. But for some reason, I don't know why, I just kind of put that to the side and started looking for schools where I could study philosophy from like a Christian perspective. Mm-hmm. And Google basically led me to Biola. And I never heard of Biola University until then. And I kind of got into like apologetics and, being able to defend your faith and whatnot. And I almost applied to their apologetics program, but I opted out of that and saw that they had a master's program in philosophy. And I was blown away. Like, I couldn't imagine studying philosophy from a Christian perspective. Like, everything I was told just like blew up, and I was so excited, and I applied. It was the only school I applied to, and I got in, and that was a huge move for me. to move from like Illinois to California
Mm-hmm.
um, by myself. But I was excited and I was determined. And so this was in like August of 2014. So it was right when Ferguson happened and Mike Brown was murdered. And I was aware of it, and I was talking to like back then a really good friend about it. But again, I was just focused on school and whatnot. Um, but yeah, I just came to California and I was just wide eyed, bushy tailed, just excited. I'm in school with a bunch of Christians and this is going great and whatnot. But yeah, it's been a lot of stuff happened since then.
Yeah, and so to give a little bit of a context there, you had gone to like a secular school, so to speak, and then but you had gotten into a really sort of aggressive youth group, right? In which that's where you were told, like, as a Christian, you shouldn't study philosophy, but lo and behold, you found a place where you could. Um, so, how long did that sort of feeling last for you that you were in like this place where everybody's Christian and you know, how long did that sort of last? Did that sort of veneer last, or did it sort of, did you, yeah, let's just, I'll just end the question there. How long did that sort of last before you felt otherwise, I guess?
Um, I would say around 2016 as it got closer to the presidential election. Um, and I think I didn't notice until I heard it on campus where I was just sitting down having lunch and I heard these two white women talking about Mike Brown. And one of them was just really distraught. Like she couldn't believe that her dad um, automatically assumed that she would side with the cop. And I just couldn't believe my ears. Like I couldn't believe that I was hearing what I was hearing. And that's when it like occurred to me like, wow, I've never heard anyone on this campus even speak about what was happening um, in Ferguson. And I went over them and I thanked them, and they were really compassionate and gracious or whatnot. But again, that was like two random girls on campus. That wasn't like someone who I knew in the program. So yeah, it really started to dawn on me like, wow, we really don't talk about real world events in class, besides like harping on like gay people or atheists or liberals or whatever, the usual targets. But yeah, I would say around 2016. Yeah, like around 2016. Um, and I had gotten to Facebook and I started like adding people from my school on there and just being very vocal politically on there. And that really shocked them. Like I guess they assumed like I was politically conservative and theologically conservative like them because I was at the school that they were at. But, I wasn't. And I was just voicing my opinion on Facebook or whatnot. And, um, yeah, I just noticed that they started to treat me differently.
Hmm. So what, uh, could you unpack that a little bit? Like did you feel it started to feel ostracized because of your beliefs?
Yeah, because of my beliefs, and I just noticed like I just didn't feel comfortable hanging out with them, considering that like wow, all of this shit is going on out in the world, and like specifically in the U.S. Like by that time, Ferguson had happened, Baltimore had happened, all these different like state sanctioned violence against black people had happened, and none of them like came to comfort me. No one came to say, hey, how are you doing with all of this happening? Like it was like being in a totally different world. um but thankfully I had come across a few black women on campus around that time, like around, I don't know, February of 2016. um and I ended up being an intern for like an organization for Black women on the campus since the numbers were so low for us overall, and I was the only Black woman in the philosophy program. So that was like a godsend that I was
Mm.
able to like connect with other black women. I mean, granted, they were undergrad, but it was still really good for me to be in that safe space with them. But that was only like a monthly meeting. And here and there, I'll see them on campus. So for the most part, I was spending time around, peers in the graduate program. And that wasn't fun.
So you found a bit of a community that was undergrad oriented, but was able to give you an outlet to at least be able to sort of either be yourself or find people that would understand your perspective in a place where you, as you mentioned, you were the only black woman in your program.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was good. So when they advertised for the intern position, I immediately hopped on it. Like I wanted to be as involved as I could. But um, yeah, it was just a really rough time. The closer it got to November of 2016, and just people's true colors came out and how they really felt about me being there, how I got there. Um, and it was hard, but I was able to not let it distract me from just really seeking out community. And that's when I found that was actually the year I found the church that I currently go to, like around July of 2016. And it's an affirming church, so that was also like a bright spot in an otherwise like pretty daunting period of time.
Mm-hmm. So if I could, I'd like to elaborate a little bit more just about um, how your sort of perspective was not only with your peers but also with your professors and things like that. Because I know from experience this was a decade earlier, and in a very different sort of situation. But in Christian colleges, it can often be a place that sort of squashes dissent. Right. It's
Hmm.
something where if you provide an answer that doesn't seem to be like the one they want, then it's sort of looked down upon. Um, so what was you mentioned a few things there as far as people started to vocalize to you how they felt about you being there.
Hmm.
Was that both your student peers as well as your professors? What was I mean that I, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily the professors, it was the peers, my peers. Uh, just like them seeing posts that I would make on Facebook, and they would like try to call me out on it. And just like, oh, well, you're only here because, or you're black, so you can get into any school you want to, or,
Mm.
um, like basically the only reason I'm at Biola is because of my race. It had nothing to do with like my academic accomplishments or anything. Um, just really just nasty things like that.
Yeah, that's awful. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I mean, those who said it, I immediately dropped them as so-called friends, and I don't talk to them at all anymore. Um, but yeah, I mean, well, in the midst of all this, a very few of the guys um, wanted to, I guess, hear my side of, like, basically hear my perspective and why I felt the way that I felt politically.
Hmm.
Um, and I wouldn't say that we see like eye to eye and we agree on everything, but uh, it was good to at least have a few, like literally three or four guys who were able and willing to have those conversations, even though they may not have agreed. They didn't completely shut me out or ignore me like the majority of my peers did. Which, looking back, I'm really glad that kind of happened that way because I didn't have to like put on a front. I didn't have to pretend like, you know, I agreed with them, or I didn't have to like, tap dance for them or anything like that. But nevertheless, it was still hard considering like the type of program that I was in and how like community oriented philosophy is. That made it really hard. But yeah.
Yeah, that all sounds very difficult, and I'm sorry. I know that a lot of times that just even for anyone that's involved in, philosophical studies, like your opinions and everything can change so often through the course of a program, whether it's a graduate program or an undergraduate program or whatever.
Mhm.
And to have all of these other social and racial stressors on top of all of that, that is
Mhm.
just an undue burden. And I'm sorry. Um, what as far as the program itself and the courses that you were taking, what did you study there as far as and what interested you? I mean, this is certainly a tumultuous time in the country, and you're processing all of that. How did that um, how did that affect your studies, and what were you drawn to in your throughout your program?
Um, Epistemology really caught my attention, which is basically like the study of knowledge and how we come to know things. And for my one of my epistemology courses, I was able to write a paper on basically an answer to the challenge of religious pluralism from the perspective of Black women or womanist theology. And at first, the professor was on board, but I really tried to contextualize just what I was trying to convey in my paper as far as like faith for these women that I was looking at. It wasn't like pie in the sky, abstract thinking. It was really concrete, and it had like um, very real had a very real impact on their lives and the lives of their communities and their families and their churches, considering like the positions that they were in as Black women and as Christians. But it didn't really fly with him towards the end. I think I just kind of lost him. But I was able to present that paper at a conference March of last year, which was really it was really good, and it was really encouraging to encounter other Black women who understood where I was coming from. So although it was hard being in the program during that time, I was able to write on something that I was passionate about. So mainly just like I had to retake metaphysics. Well, I have to, but I chose to, and I retook it, and I really enjoyed it. So like metaphysics, epistemology, philosophy of mind, um, things like that. That I really, I guess they provided not a hobby, but like a way out of thinking about what was going on politically in the country at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, granted, I didn't get to like talk to my peers about what was happening because, they didn't care, but um, I still was able to like use um, my time in school to like, I guess, distract me from what was going on politically.
Yeah. So you also mentioned that you, during that time as well, during this really, um, this time where there was a lot politically going on, and then you had these other elements that are happening on your campus, that off campus, you found a community that you resonated with.
Mm-hmm.
So what was that community like? You mentioned that it was affirming, and what did that provide you, just personally?
I heard things in the church when I first started going, and even up until this point, that I never thought I would hear, as far as like people like openly doubting things about their faith and their place in the world, and it was mind blowing. Having God be referred to not just with male pronouns, but female pronouns as well, or them pronouns, and just seeing openly queer couples and other queer folk in church was it was what I needed, but I didn't know how much I needed it until I got it. And it was just so good and very just life giving. So I really got, and I still am, I really got involved in any way that I could with helping out with whatever was needed of me in church or with other people in the community. So it was really, the timing was just perfect with how I came about finding the church, what was happening politically, what was happening on campus. It was a really good space for me to just be and be able to breathe and relax and to be myself.
Yeah, that's great. Just for you personally, why do you think it's so important for people to be able to hear those things, like from a pulpit, those sorts of affirmational things?
Mm-hmm.
What is it about a place like a church in particular that that makes that sort of a healing or a safe space? Because some people do elect to leave, and I think that's a valid option. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious for you, what made that expression um, so so validating for you?
The fact that I noticed that it wasn't just mere opinion, like, oh, I believe God says X, Y, and Z, or I feel this way. It was people using what was and what still is being used as a weapon against marginalized groups, as like a tool for liberation. And to have it be done with authority and with grace and with care and compassion. Um, for me, that's what's so life giving. The fact that it's people who genuinely love God and who genuinely love Jesus, um, but who they how can I put it? They know who they are. They don't allow. I don't know how to put it. They know who they are in Christ, and they know who they are as far as race, gender, sexuality, um, and they're able to integrate all of that into their faith and into their life in a holistic way, in a way that's not like, well, my faith says this horrible thing, but nevertheless, I'm still queer, or I'm still unapologetically pro-black, or I'm still a feminist. No, they can like incorporate all of that into their faith without having to like make all these weird reaches or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, that totally makes sense, and I I think that is the the me personally. I think that's probably the most valuable use of religion in this day and age. When it's to your very well said point that it's something that is often used to dominate.
Mm-hmm.
But here in this church, you found it as a way of liberation, which
Mm-hmm.
is absolutely, I think, the most empowering thing, and it empowers the people that should be empowered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It also, for me, it caused me to see that that can be had outside of church as well. Like it doesn't have to necessarily be like this is the only way that you can find liberation and freedom, but this is a way that you can find it. And not that like I don't know how to put it, but like someone can be agnostic or an atheist or whatever, and they're still a person to be respected
Mm-hmm.
and loved and cared for and validated, and you don't need to be like evangelizing to them or anything like that. Like that's something I've noticed too with the church that I attend. Like there's not like a lot of conversation surrounding evangelizing or how many people have you led to Christ. Like that was something that really bothered me when I first became a Christian. Like, oh my gosh, I haven't led anyone to Christ, or no one said the sinner's prayer. Like I haven't heard that at all at this church. So that's also
Yeah.
something that's really positive.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of people are allergic to that part of evangelical stuff. Is yeah, just how much you're expected to turn someone into like an acquisition target,
Mhm.
like you're trying to sell them Jesus.
Mhm.
You know, that's definitely very true. That it does really just make people into souls to save instead of whole people.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm curious. Like you mentioned that your study was actually one of the things you focused on a lot was this paper about pluralism and religious pluralism. Excuse me, it's a hard word for me
Mhm.
to say, and
Mhm.
um, and how it related to womanist and black theologians. So,
Mhm.
um, could you talk a little bit about that in particular? Because it seems that the themes that you were studying was also something that you sort of practically experienced too through this church. I'm not sure if I'm artificially making a connection there, and you can certainly tell me if I am, um, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
But I am curious what your studies were about and how that um, and how just how that worked and relative to pluralism and as you said like treating a person whether they're agnostic or atheist or some variation of Christian.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I think I was a little too heavy-handed in the paper as far as like Christianity is the only religion that provides the tools of liberation for specifically Black women. Like now, I wouldn't say that explicitly. I think um, I'm pretty sure other religions can also provide that those tools of liberation, or Black women who are non-religious or whatever, however they choose to go about finding freedom. Um, but I still, I still hold to like there's something unique about how Black women used the Word of God and the church communities to seek out freedom for themselves and their families and their communities in the here and now, and not like some afterlife type deal or whatever.
mm-hmm.
Um, and that's definitely something that I've experienced in the church that I'm attending. They haven't explicitly talked about womanist theology, but um, that's definitely something that's popped up here and there for me personally during sermons or during worship or whatever. So I definitely see the connection. I don't think I've like really delved like that deep into it, but I'm actually rereading John Hicks' um, paper that we had to read for class, um, which I use as one of the main sources for my paper on religious pluralism. So I might have a different opinion
Mm-hmm.
once I look it over, and now that I've like gone through graduate school and I guess like simultaneously like deconstructed my faith, but also grown into it and matured in it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So this deconstruction part, what is that? How is that sort of? How has that come about for you? That
Mm-hmm.
is a phrase that a lot of people use. That that is very good as a sort of anchor, as like this. We've both deconstructed. We have that shared language of
Mm-hmm.
we've come from a more conservative or fundamentalist place and have arrived at a different place. So
Mm-hmm.
what was that process like for you? Because I mean, it sounds like you did it in an intensive period. You were in a graduate program, experiencing racial and social stressors,
Mm-hmm.
and like that's a lot. Even just one of those is crazy, like
Mm-hmm.
crazy amounts of stress. So you mainlined a ton of things at the same time. How did that deconstruction, as just a whole other thing that's intense, um,
Mm-hmm.
how did that play out for you? Or is it still going on? I mean, to me, I think it may not be something that's been completed, um, or whether it's just an ongoing process.
Yeah, I've noticed there's less guilt as far as like, oh, I have to spend quiet time with God or I have to journal or whatever. Like, I don't feel that guilt anymore. When I wake up, I feel like more free, less lighter. And I don't know when I stopped doing that specifically. I think probably around 2016. And no one like told me to stop doing it. I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I stopped just feeling guilty about it.
Right. Yeah.
And mainly that and just being in an affirming church really confirmed a lot of um, not necessarily feelings, but truths that I already had since I became a Christian. Like, okay, well, I just don't think that, God wants to send me to this eternal, fire and brimstone place where I'm gonna burn in hell just because I'm not, straight or whatever. And just having that be like confirmed in so many different ways in the church, in conversation with others, through living with others who don't believe that either. Um, so it was just that. It was just becoming more radical politically and theologically. And it wasn't like, oh, I woke up one morning and decided I was going to like start reading about all of these radicals, but it just happened. And I just came across a bunch of books that helped me, that is helping me along with just picking apart different lies and confirming other things. But so just mainly books and conversations with others and not feeling this pressure to read like the Bible every day or to pray multiple times a day or whatnot. Not having to like censor myself, I guess, in a way. Like that's also been helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. It frees you from that sense of obligation or duty when you don't feel like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely a very sort of liberating thing. Like a forced quiet time or devotional reading is like the worst.
Yeah. And I mean, like, it may work for some people, but like, I think it's something so, uh, it's very damaging to like force an entire group of people to do the exact same thing. And you may not like, no one like literally came into my room and forced me to do it, but it was like hammered into my head.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, it may work for some people, but for me, that's just not how I'm wired.
Right. Yeah. I think you make a good point there as far as like, even, I think one of the things that's so interesting about evangelicalism is that like you get all these social cues, even if there's not somebody like explicitly saying, okay, like this is your new Christian packet, and you have to read the Bible in a year, and you have to like get my utmost for his highest and read it every like
So they actually got that for me for my birthday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so but all this stuff is like in the air, and because it's got this weight of like divine providence or something, it feels so consequential. And it's not like until you sort of see a different way of the way other people very meaningfully live out their faith, and their lives are lived in a totally different way, that you see that that a lot of that stuff, even if you just absorb it subconsciously, like there's a lot of trappings there, and it's so crazy to be on the other side of that, I think.
Yeah, it is. It is. And like even it was funny, I was thinking about music the other day and just how like when I first became a Christian, I like trashed all the music that I loved because it wasn't like explicitly Christian. And now I'm
Right.
like, damn, I missed out on some really, now I'm like, with my Apple subscription, I'm like downloading all this music that I used to love. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, damn, there's just so much good art out there and music and movies and
Right.
books and whatnot. And, it's not a sin to enjoy that stuff and to um, you know, to participate in it or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. When you feel the obligation to have the Christian version of everything. Yeah.
Hmm.
And that can often be heightened on Christian campuses and things like that too.
Hmm.
Um, I remember back in like the church sort of environment, there was a book. Did you ever see the book The Heart of the Artist? It was sort of
No.
about being a Christian artist or performer or writer or any creative, and I'm sure it could extend to something like philosophy or theology,
Hmm.
but it sort of put fences up, and it's like
Yeah.
you have to stay within these parameters. If you go outside, then it's dangerous out there. Um,
Hmm.
and then, yeah, there was another one that I had just thought of, but there were some books, probably some books by Mark Knoll or something like that about Christian scholarship. Because you can't, it's the only way to be a scholar and a Christian is to teach at an evangelical school. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So I'm curious. You just finished, uh, graduate school recently.
Mhm.
So you mentioned that you did feel like uh, this general pull to start reading more broadly. I'm curious what you ended up reading. And because I'm sure that you could give some great recommendations to our listeners, to me, to people that um, may not know like the womanist or liberation theologies very well. Um, and I think it's the most relevant time for those voices to be heard by as broad of audiences as possible because it speaks so loudly to the situation we're in, and it's fills that prophetic role that I think is necessary in our
Mhm.
current climate. So, um, if you have any recommendations or anything like that, I would love to be able to pass those along to people just by you listing a couple, if that's something you'd like to do.
Yeah. So, like 2 summers ago in 2016, I was on the hunt for like books just only by and about and or about Black women. So I would just go to all these used bookstores around, LA or whatever, and just look for them. And I never got a chance to read them because I was always reading philosophy textbooks for school or whatnot. And so once I graduated, I immediately started Elaine Brown's autobiography, A Taste of Power. She was the only Black woman who was the head of the Black Panther Party for a short while. Um, and then I've been reading Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria by Dr. Beverly Tatum. And I actually saw her spoke, I think, a week and a half ago in LA, and it was really good. And it's just like she's a psychologist, and it's just conversations about race and identity and whatnot. And um, so far I've been reading that, but it's taken me a long time to get through them. Like they're really good, but I think the internet has just really messed up my attention span. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I need to maybe I'll just focus on some fiction. So now I'm reading, this is the third book by Zadie Smith that I'm reading called NW. Um, and I also found a Toni Morrison novel, Song of Solomon, for like $1 at a used bookstore. Um, so yeah, right now I'm just like on a fiction kick where there's things about race and being a woman and whatnot, but it's not as heavy handed as those other books that I mentioned.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Fiction is definitely the go-to when you need it. It's a little lighter reading, especially
Mm-hmm.
when your regular fare is philosophy and social commentary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is post graduation look like for you? Have you felt like getting out of some of those more difficult sorts of relationships and things like that, and how are you feeling about things these days?
I'm feeling good. I actually went to Claremont last week, sometime last week, to hang out with someone I met on Twitter. And he like showed me around campus or whatnot, and we hung out with some of his friends, and that was really encouraging. And it was a total contrast from like attempting to hang out with guys in the philosophy program. Like they weren't like self-righteous about what they knew. Like they were super super intelligent, but they weren't like self-righteous. They didn't like gaslight me or anything. I mean, granted they had just met me, but it still felt more authentic and like organic, the conversations. And they were really encouraging when I told them like what I wanted to eventually like, write my dissertation off for my PhD. Um, so I've been looking into going back to school probably this fall at Claremont, and just to see how that goes, to get my MA probably in religious studies, um, because they have some professors there that I really want to connect with, and just finding work. Honestly, that's it. And reading, resting, taking care of myself, staying off Twitter.
That is
So
taking Twitter breaks is a very good good call.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, I know. We touched base a little bit on Twitter, and you, I told you last time we talked I hadn't seen Get Out, which I finally did correct that mistake. But I also know, from following you on Twitter that you've watched The Good Place, right? As
Yes.
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So, so just for a little bit of lighter fare here, what do you think of that show? And like being a philosophy student, how has that been? Because it's front and center with Chidi Anagonye. I mean, he he drives that show. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah. I think his character is what happens when you just like he's smart. He's obviously really intelligent. He knows his shit, but like he doesn't know how to apply it well. Like I think he just takes what he's learned just a little bit too literally, and doesn't take or yeah, doesn't take into account that life situations aren't as black and white as a lot of philosophers try to make it out to be.
Hmm.
But it's a really good show, and just examining how people can go from like good and bad, and even like Kristen Bell's main character deconstructing like her entire life, and what have I been doing with my life up until this point, and what does it mean to be good. And um yeah, I think now that I've gone through what I've gone through over the past 3 years, I'm able to better enjoy the show. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely a really really fun show to be able to watch. And well, I mean, I think a lot of Christians that have come from this sorts of evangelical or fundamentalist backgrounds have a lot of things to process about their assumptions about the afterlife. And I feel like, yeah, to see that show in this
Yeah.
period is pretty great.
Yeah. Yeah, most
Yeah.
definitely. And like, yeah, I think it's not, again, like what it's not what we expect it to be, the afterlife. And I don't think it needs to, like, for me personally, it doesn't need to, I don't need to dwell on it as much as I was taught to dwell on it. And I think that show really brought that out, as far as like um everything's not as it seems, even in the
Right.
afterlife. So I
Yeah.
think that was really, really, really genius of them to like play with that, and to have them like go back and see what they did wrong in their lives, and how that affected them in the afterlife or whatnot. So yes, a really good show. I didn't think I would like it, but I
Right.
really loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. I binged it a lot, and I think that element you said of like everything's not as it seems.
Hmm.
It's so twisty, and no spoiler zone here and everything, but it's so twisty and like but in like a very unannoying way.
Hmm.
Like Lost could get kind of annoying with its twists and everything back in the day. But yeah, The Good Place is really great for that.
Yeah, it's really good. I actually binged it too because I didn't even hear about it when it first came out. I think someone told me about it like a month ago.
Hmm.
Um, and I was like, oh, a show about the afterlife, and they talk about philosophy and whatnot. So yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, sorry, I'm hearing some stuff in the background. I'm just gonna wait 1 second, just to. Oh, okay, cool. I'm glad to hear that you're in a good place now, and that you've got yourself sort of settled out there and have your next sort of um, next few steps planned out. So
Yeah.
I'm really glad to hear that. Was there anything that else that we didn't really touch on that you'd like to talk about?
Nothing that I can think of. I think that was the gist of it.
Okay, great. Well, where can people find you? Where can they where can they help either support you, or anything like that? Where can I point people to hear more of your story?
My handle on Twitter is underscore Delisa, capital Delisa, capital Perry. So yeah, I'm mainly on Twitter, and I guess Facebook, but I'm mainly there just to keep up with like family and whatnot.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I mainly get in trouble on Twitter, so yeah, I
Great.
keep everything on there.
Great. Awesome. Well, Delisa, thanks for connecting with me again. I'm glad we got to talk a little bit more.
Yeah,
And yeah, I'm glad we're connected on Twitter, and we'll still be talking.
yeah.
Thank you
Thanks for
very much.
having me. Uh huh.